Hello, everybody. Mac has had his PC decided to restart, but we are here waiting. While we're doing that, I am joined today by Jason. I know you hate titles, but unfortunately, for this purpose, otherwise people won't know who you are. Our newly appointed Chief Operations Officer, and amongst other things, today, Jason Grooms. And then he got
Thank
your
you,
name
thank you, thank
mixed
you.
up. And then he got your, and then he said Jason beforehand. Um, memory doesn't memories don't generally they go downhill from here pretty fast, I think. But
Yeah, it gets worse the older you get too. Names have always been a weakness of mine, so I lean into it. That's all.
So Jason, while we're waiting for Mac's PC to eventually allow Mac to grace us with his presence, tell us about yourself and your own story with autism and A another A
Yeah, all the
ADHD,
A's.
ADD,
Yeah,
triple A.
all the nice A labels we get. Yeah. So it's kind of it's not a unique story, but it is a unique one for me, a unique experience. I'm originally from the East Coast. I'm from Florida. Grew up there, and then I've been on the West Coast, Washington State and California. Now I've been in California for the past 6 years. So I've traveled all over the country. I've done a lot of work with a lot of companies all over the place. But one of the things that's always kind of stood out is how I seem to have this knack for thinking outside the box for companies. And one of the things that I'm really I like to think I'm pretty decent at, but one of the things I've had a great career at is teaching people. And I never planned it, never wanted to be a adult trainer or a teacher or adult learning. It just kind of happened. And it's funny because it's really an outcome of the fact that I love to share and I love to overshare. So when I have all these hobbies or I learn all these amazing things, I like to talk to people about them. And one of the first jobs I had right out of college was working at Disney in Orlando. And it wasn't long before they asked me to be a trainer because I just love teaching people how to do it. And it just kind of caught on from there. But I wasn't diagnosed until I was in my late 40s, and really had been
Pretty
trying to
late.
figure out how to just maintain what was going on and how to live a more peaceful life and sort of come to terms with what was going on. And for years and years, it was no one knew, and I kind of got the same runaround until finally I found a couple of doctors together here in San Diego, and gave me some insight. But it's really strange getting that diagnosis at this age because I spent a lot of time looking back at, oh, now that makes sense. Oh, now I remember that happening. Oh my gosh, that's exactly why that was a thing. So it was a lot
Well,
of, I wouldn't say necessarily uh, back feeling bad. It was more just a matter of looking back and all of a sudden some pieces all just fitting together from when I was little to now. So fully now I try and live a life that suits how my brain works, and I lean into my hobbies. I got tons of them. It helps fill me up, so it gets me where I want to go. But
wow,
still
and
a struggle. Still a struggle.
wow, and Mac is just joined us in the back of the room. He cannot hear anything we're saying unless he's got his other monitors um on. But we are going to bring him up, and I suspect that after that he will want to get his questions out. So sorry, people, we are basically going to 3 screens now, and sorry about the lines. Here we go.
There we go.
Mac,
Look at those faces.
ask away. I know you have several questions, so I will shut up, and away you go.
Excuse me, but yes. So I could hear what you were both saying while I was sitting backstage, and I was listening to Jason's comments there about being diagnosed in your 40s.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Late
I guess the question that I have for you there is, what impact do you think it made with regards to how you function today compared to how you were functioning prior, now that you have the diagnosis?
I mean, I do wish I'd known earlier, because a lot of the struggles that I had were really self confidence and trying to come to terms with what was happening. And so for many years, it felt like it was just something that was with me, that I was broken or different, or somehow I just couldn't do what other people could do. And now looking at it, it feels a lot more like, well, this is just a difference. This is not something broken, right? And I've always felt really positive about my outside the box approach. I love being creative. I love coming up with new ways to deal with situations or problems. It's just now I feel like I can understand it a little bit more, and I have a community of people around me, which has made all the difference, to help leverage that as a strength. Whereas before it was seen as a weakness, and now I really embrace it. It's night and day difference, knowing and not knowing, what's going on and what you're feeling.
Mac,
So I guess
you are off again. So I just let the ball roll until you.
It's all good. I'll pass the mic back to you after this question. I guess, one of the questions Joel and I have previously discussed, and we've had other people, ask him similar questions, is how important do you think it is that we have early diagnoses for people? I'm going to leave it at that without trying to put words in your mouth.
That's actually a brilliant question, and I think when I think about it, there are two benefits to that. There's a benefit to the person individually, right? So understanding why someone functions the way they do. For me, if I had known earlier, I know it would have felt more comfortable, more accepting. It would have been easier for me to understand and even adapt, right? And help my interaction with other people. So from a personal perspective, I think it would really help kids who get this diagnosis early adapt to life better and just have a more peaceful, pleasant, and interactive life. But on top of that, I think one of the things we struggle with as a society overall is just how society deals with brains like ours, or deals with people like us. And the fact that so many people don't know about it, don't understand it. I mean, even when I was a kid, it wasn't the same. The diagnosis wasn't the same, and the people that got the diagnosis were only a very small slice. And so I think as a way to grow our understanding as a society and find a way to incorporate and really let everyone in, that has to happen earlier, so that the people that grow up with kid that gets diagnosed just see it as another person in their life, and the friends they have, and their relatives, and their school, and their extracurricular activities. It's just another person, instead of it being so outside of the norm that it's rejected, right? So the benefit of having that early diagnosis, one, is for the individual, but two, I think it's critical for changing the way people treat those with a different way of processing the world.
Mac, you're on mute.
The ever painful mute button. I was saying I've got loads more questions, but I'll pass the mic to Joel, and then I'll come back because I've got a few more questions on that.
Yeah.
Well, Jason, diagnosis for me personally, is what has made me more clarified a lot of things. Going through schools, changing schools, went through 4 schools, and then went through college and still didn't really fit in, because what is fitting in? You're your own person. You're not
right.
The
change of definition for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like what is being in, what is normal? Like there's no definition of normal.
There is no definition of normal. Although at the moment in this particular space, it seems to be normal that everyone has a beard. So
you got to catch up, man. You got just a little bit going on there. You got to. I think we've got you on the white too.
Right, Jason, what was school? What was growing up like before you got the diagnosis, and for about 4 decades later?
Oh. School was a rough experience for me, at least public school. When I went through high school, it was a difficult experience for me, and I always thought it was just because I was lazy or I didn't like to do the work. Because I would understand the concept, any class, I would understand how to do something and fight tooth and nail, not understand why I had to go home and do it over again 15 times, right, to do homework. Or at the beginning of the semester, I'd already calculated what score I'd have to get on the 3 main tests that we had for the semester and not have to do the other work, right? I'd already measure out, okay, I can skip 5 homeworks and still get a B or a C in the class as long as I ace the tests, and I knew I would ace the tests. And it was something that put the teachers off. It was something that put the other students off, and I just never had a good social weather vane. I never had a good social barometer. It was really tough for me to link in with people or be part of a group, and so for me it was really difficult. It was a structure that I just was not suited to. When I got into college, I did have a little bit of a different experience because I did meet professors, and I had a great advisor, Dr. Terry Pruitt at the university I went to. I stumbled into taking anthropology, and it was an elective, just something I was taking for fun, and really fell in love with it. I think because my fascination with how human beings interact with each other. And I ended up getting my degree in cultural anthropology, so studying the communication and interaction of people in groups and how groups evolve over time and what are the pressures. And I realized later on that I was attracted to that because I couldn't understand other humans very well. And it was always like I was an outsider studying them, and was never able to replicate sort of the social connection with people the same way. Now, I do have very close friends, good people that I'm really close with, but it's a smaller group, and it takes longer for me to connect with someone who understands that, my computer works different ways than theirs does. So as a school experience, it was not my favorite. I did have some great teachers, wonderful administrators, some people that helped me out, but it was the exception more than the norm. College was a little more freeing. I think that my professors saw something different in me and really leaned into that in a lot of ways. But that's another reason why I think I love teaching and helping other people learn, is because I recognize there's so many different ways of absorbing information, and there's so many different ways of processing and understanding. It's not just about reading something or repeating it or doing something over and over. That there's this whole experiential part of it. And, I know for me, one of the things that's a big part of what I learned is tactile. Like, I like getting in hands-on stuff. I like feeling things and smelling it and experiencing it. What is it like? And so I try and build that into any of the education programs I put together, because I didn't get that as much when I was a kid or when I was new in my career. So education to me is really something that I hope is on the rise. I think with a lot of new technologies, there's a change in the way we do it. I see, obviously, public schools and government schools are going to lag behind that just because of the amount of money that's in it and the bureaucracy involved. But in general, I push for more integrated learning that'll hopefully help some of that school experience. But I really think it's about our personal social experience. So the more that kids see other kids that are just like them, the more that there's diversity around them, diversity of thought, diversity of culture, diversity of background, and the like, the more normal it is for everyone, and the more society sort of balances out. Right now, everybody just is another person. There's a nice spectrum, and we understand there's this beautiful spectrum of the way people think, but none of it's negative, none of it's good, bad, or normal. Right? Yep. It just is. It's part of the diversity of humanity.
That I think I told you that when we first had it, when we eventually managed to get a call about 2 years later. And your experiences is pretty much on par of what I like to do. I learn by doing. I'm also a very hands-on person. I'm also very needing to see things work or otherwise. And I think Mac is the same in certain respects. And it's not just, I don't think it's just a school education system though. I believe it does still sort of manifest itself in the workplace as well. Now, without choosing my words very carefully here, what can you tell us? Stay far away of what you can't tell us. But what can you tell us in the work environment as you've experienced?
Well, a lot of similarities with school, right? There's a lot of, work has to be a certain way in many people's minds, right? There has to be a certain way to do it. And if you do it differently than that, even if you get to the same result or a better result, I think the structure of that system gets a little nervous, right? Because if I can do it a completely different way, because to me, what all matters is the goal. What are you trying to achieve? What are you trying to get at the end? For a company, that's profitability, that's sales, that's tenure of employees, that's innovation. Yeah. And so these, just like in school, having to do it these structured ways through these processes, sometimes difficult for me. And I like to get to them in different ways. So in that way, it's been very difficult. The other part is, just like in school, you really do the same thing that I do, is you ask the most dangerous question of all: why? And I like to ask why a lot, because I don't know why something is happening the way it is, or why is it that way. So if someone says this is the way it is, and this is what we have to do, why have to do it that way? What's driving that? Is there some parameter that I don't know about? Is there some motivation? Is this a legality issue? It's a spending issue. And a lot of times that's a very uncomfortable question for people. And asking that why, challenging the status quo, is super uncomfortable for a lot of folks. But I feel like for us, it's a state of norm. Like I'm thinking that all the time. I'm always, no matter if I'm walking down the street and I see things, just off to the side, or if I'm focused on, creating some program, or I'm coaching somebody, I'm always asking that why question, because to me, that's where some of the most valuable information comes from. What motivated this to happen in the first place? Maybe I can deconstruct. Is there a pressure on the outside that's causing us to do this? Because it's inefficient. Let's maybe get rid of that pressure. Or so it's problem solving to me, but asking why for a lot of reasons for people feels almost accusatory. Like you're telling them that
for me as well.
Bad. When you ask why, it's almost like, this is horrible. Why did you do this? When I never would ask that way, right? It's
Jason,
let me understanding.
Let me ask you this question: how often do you get the response because when you ask the question why?
Yeah, in a lot of different forms, right? Well, we've always done it this way, or well, it's important to do it this way so everyone else can understand it and follow. Well, it's important to do it this way so we can, repeat it or replicate it. So all the way down to just because I said so. And, I've gotten that answer. And I've gotten that answer from senior executives, right? From people who are senior leaders, because I said so. And so it's easy to, and I want to condition this for just a minute. It's easy for me to get upset about stuff, or it would be easy for anyone to just take that as a, business is messed up, people are bad. But I really try and take it as a way to learn how to be a better leader for the people that work around me. So when I see that someone reacts that way and says, do it because I said so, that means I spend a lot more time trying to explain, if there are parameters, why they're there and what's important about them. Because my way of approaching leadership has always been to set a goal on the horizon, something we want to achieve, some great vision, some great destination, something really exciting, and let people support with how they get there. Right? Not define exactly the path they should take, not tell them exactly how they should do it, because that's the real strength of diverse minds and diverse approaches and backgrounds, because there's a recipe behind them of all these experiences and knowledge that I can never know. I'd rather them get excited and show me how they get there. So in a work experience, that's not always the case, at least in the places I've been. And I know we talked about this a little bit in the past, Joel, but another thing that happens a lot with folks with our types of brains is we have a lot of different jobs. And while I would consider that some of my jobs have been very successful, I've had a lot. I've had a lot of different jobs over the course of my career. And I saw it as a benefit, as a positive, because I know a lot about a lot of different industries and people and a lot of interactions. But it's not always seen that way. And so sometimes that's a struggle to help understand the benefits of that diversity of background. Right? I may have had a handful of jobs, but that's not because I want to leave them. I'm understanding and processing and trying to find the one that fits, my style and how to work. So
I'd be very interested, because why in school and work setting and just about any setting is a dangerous word to use, yet when you're the one asking it, it suddenly becomes not dangerous. So I'm just waiting for some wise guy to say it's a dangerous word. Why are you asking me this? Why are you using the word why?
I haven't had that happen yet, but that would be a good one.
I think it's an interesting one, because as children, we're always asking the question why, because we're absorbing. But it's like, I guess fear is a lot of fear that we have as adults is learned behavior. As an example, when I was 10, 15, when I went surfing, I wasn't scared of the big waves or being dumped, on the beach or any of those things. But as I got older, and you hear about shark attacks and all kinds of different things, all of a sudden there's that perceived fear of what you see from others and how others respond. So you start padding yourself, as it were. And we get to the real world, as they call it, when we leave school, and then why becomes confrontational all of a sudden. But that I look at the similarities, and Jason, I guess this is another question for you, because there's a lot of similarities between leadership and business and parenting about how you respond to why. And unfortunately, in a lot of organizations, or even in parenting, that response to the why, like the because I said so, because it's always been done that way, those become the blockers to progress. And this is where I've seen some large organizations and worked with one of the Microsoft's top experts when it comes to security, cybersecurity, but also emergency services side of things. And I got to ask him this question a few years ago at a conference in front of a lot of people, because we were looking at progress and what are the biggest blockers to progress. And he turned around, he went, well, sometimes it's just individuals who are not prepared to grow any further. They've got to that stage where they've reached that stage where they think they know it all. And when that inquisitiveness stops, the creativity becomes a challenge. What would you say to organizations that are listening? Because learning and development is one of your big things, and putting training programs and all these things together. What would you say to organizations where they've hit a plateau and they've got individuals in place that are not open-minded to not only neurodiversity but the why?
Yeah, it's a lot like anything else. It's practice and habit, right? There isn't a magic bullet of something you can do to change someone's mind by just giving them some advice, but there are things you can do to tell people to add to their habit. One of the things I love to do with some of my leaders that I coach is have them set up so that when they have team meetings, let's say, or department meetings or group meetings, designate one person as the one who has to be pushing back on the idea. So if somebody comes in and you have one team is presenting an idea or you're presenting an idea, someone's official role is to be that counterpoint, to find the reasons why, or to ask questions, or to be the difficult one. And then you rotate that position around and kind of get people out of their comfort zone. And you have to build trust to get there first. There's some steps to get there to really get to a good space, depending on where your team is. But in general, what that does, it gives us free reign. It says, okay, I may not be willing to grow, but I might have a really good sense of picking out where issues might occur in somebody else's idea. So it gives me a chance to think. And once you've done a round robin or two over the course of a couple of weeks and your team has had a chance to practice it, you tend to get people being a little bit more open about testing that out, because now I have an official reason to give me a title in the meeting. I kind of am the counterpoint. I'm the one who's pushing back or coming up with ideas. But also, any good leader should start to question their own ideas by themselves, right? Ways to think, okay, I don't know everything. I'm not here because I'm the smartest. I'm not here because I do better than anyone else. A leader is in their role as a connector, right? Their job is to help make other folks successful and help find ways for them to move forward. So in a business setting, you have to build in that kind of questioning structurally, right? Ask for that kind of pushback. I'm sure both of you, things they do is I'm sure both of you have taken employee surveys, right? So that's a common thing around a lot of companies. How do you feel about something? But there's a lot of deep psychology behind those surveys. And one of them is, if I ask you as a company, and I'm asking you, do you like this thing that we do? And most of the people say no, and I don't do something about that thing, I have now created an emotional connection there to say, I don't care about what you think about that, right? It's implied and it's subtle, but it's one of those things, if you're asking about it, you need to act on it. So the same with your own teams. If you're encouraging to come forward with outside the box approaches or why something might work better in a different way, or when someone asks why, then that's going to get forward and move with it. Otherwise, it's just going to fall right back to the way it was. Like hiring a consultant to come in for a couple of weeks, everybody better, and they leave and the business goes back to the way it was. So in this setting, it's a little bit more of building it in structurally and starting to question on a regular basis. But it's a learning. It's going to be painful. It always sort of is, especially the more resistance that they have to it. But the first thing that has to start is a trust between the folks that are there, right? And I know that one of the other issues that I've dealt with is that sense of trust and that elevated sense of justice and ethics, right? So anytime I see anything that's related to ethics or something that I feel like might be not quite honest or deceptive or something, that feeds into it a little bit more as well. So you're not going to get as much someone feeling put out or to push forward if that trust isn't there.
Yeah, I really love the way you put that, because a lot of people realize, they see the stumbling block or the gatekeeper or the person that's the obstacle. And in many ways it's, well, that person needs to move on, or that person needs to, they need to go. But they forget about the fact that that person, there's a reason why they have a certain set of beliefs within an organization due to experience of how things have worked in the past. But by giving them those different roles, you get that opportunity to be able to get those different side, decision-making insights and contributions. So very powerful. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
The key word there you use, Mac, is the word past. The key word there you use is the word past. That's where that should stay if you're going forwards. In any situation.
It's also where people stash that sense of safety, right? So Mac, when you talk about you didn't have fear of the ocean when you first started surfing, you didn't have the memories of someone telling you a story about it, or someone telling you what happened to them, or relating their experience. And so those memories then build up that, what you think is that safety wall that keeps you safe. And that's similar to why a lot of people resist that questioning of why. It's because in the past they've gotten knocked back by asking the teacher why, and so they're going to be hesitant to hear it as well. You know, it's our need for belonging to a group, right? One of our greatest fears is not death. Our greatest fear is being ostracized from humanity, right? Left out of our group, left out of our friends, left out of our relationships.
No, that ship has sailed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting because, you know, as we, you know, all of us have our baggage, as it were, you know, the things that we kind of contribute to our thinking, but as we move forward, we've also got to be able to get to that educated process where we can go, are these beliefs and ideas still serving us? Because they were like they were 10 years ago, but that doesn't mean now it still applies. You know, if we look at things like AI as an example, and we look at all these different technologies that are coming out, you know, if we look at Skype 10 years, 15, 20 years ago, people were like, oh, I don't know, this is hard work. You know, I can't remember my password. This video thing is a nonsense. The lockdown happens, and Zoom has become second nature for everybody because we're forced into a situation where it's this or nothing.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, a lot of those people who were digitally inadequate, all of a sudden, you know, I was having 70, 80-year-old people sitting there going, yeah, let me show you how to use Zoom. And I'm like, whoa, look at this. Because there's a change in thinking, and they've let go of that I can't because.
It's amazing when you're motivated by necessity, how you can learn, right? So if something happens that you have to learn, like the pandemic created a whole set of conditions that we had to learn very quickly. And so all of a sudden we learned them, and now it's ubiquitous. Video and video chat and working on Teams and Slack and things like that is, you know, it's normal, but it was for years just kind of in the background, not really there. And suddenly now we know how to do it. But it's incredible what our capacity is.
Well, this is the thing, you know, and the reason I've kind of gone slightly off tangent, I guess, is, you know, bringing it back to the whole neurodiversity side of things, because you mentioned earlier about early diagnosis would have been helpful because, you know, of various reasons, and also the impact of what it meant to you once you were diagnosed, because it brought clarity. But also it made it easier for people to be able to, around you, to be able to deal with things and understand, communicate. The challenge is that we still have a lot of people that have no idea what neurodiversity is, or, you know, or still have an idea of what autism is 10 years ago. Not clear on the fact that the spectrum is exactly that. It's a spectrum. It's not just a singular.
I'm going to bring this comment up from YouTube.
Reference is a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, so when it comes to the fact that we've all, you know, we've just, and I love the fact that you've mentioned that necessity is a great tool to help us push through things, you know. And in fact, I've got my own thoughts on this, but I want to ask you, how do we bring it to the forefront that it becomes a necessity for organizations, institutions, schools, etc., to recognize that neurodiversity, you know, let's say specifically autism, becomes a necessary tool that everybody knows how to be able to understand those individuals and deal with them, as opposed to the very light touch worth of education that most, you know, general organizations in school currently have.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of there are a couple of things that I think will take care of themselves. At least I have a strong belief in that they will. From a business perspective, I think in general, business and organizations are driven by success, and success is driven by customer engagement, right? So customers want innovation. They want things that make their lives easier,
And
services that are
satisfaction.
great. Right. And so a business is always going to go for greater advantage. And I think that it is almost a non-starter that you can't have that kind of innovation and success without people who think differently. And we have scores and scores of examples of people who we hold high. We may not put the autism label on them or the neurodivergent label on them, but we hold them on high as different thinkers, and they have been mainstays in history. So I think that there will be a recognition, and I know some companies are doing some unique things with some new programs now, but I think there's going to be a recognition that to break forward and to really do some innovative stuff, you need people that think that way. And so companies will embrace it because it creates advantage, that creates profits, that creates success for them. Societally, it's a slower tank, and I think that in general, it has to be something that's made to just seem as normal. The first start has really got to be understanding, though, because the struggle that we all have is that the level of understanding of what our neurology, right, the biology of what's actually happening. This is not just the misunderstanding is that this is something we decide, right? We just don't want to do something this way, or we just don't like doing something or thinking a certain way, or going to school or doing our homework things. It's not about that. It's like a blindness, a mental blindness. So you have parts of your brain that cannot see some things, and so you need just subtle guides. Someone who is visually impaired has guides like the auditory crosswalk or the grooves on the ground, or things that make their life a little easier. So I think it's at some point we're going to have to recognize that there are enough people in the world that can contribute significantly that just need some guide rails that will eventually just sort of become normal. Like, we don't think about the audio crosswalks as much anymore.
No.
Or we don't think about Braille being on a sign on a building. And so from that perspective, from a sort of treating, I hate calling it a disability, but sort of helping another part of our group to be successful and move through the world in a easier way, I think that'll get there. But we really need more understanding also on a medical level, that biology of what's actually happening here. And is this just a normal part of the spectrum of humanity that's always been here, and we're just now understanding it? I mean, always going back to the analogy of left-handedness, right? Left-handedness skyrocketed in the United States. It doesn't because suddenly medically we had a whole bunch more people that were left brain or right brain and wrote with their left hand. It was because we stopped forcing them to write with their right hand, right? So it was this understanding level that occurred, and suddenly it opened up, and then there's this balance of understanding that helps us move forward. So business, I think, will get us there. The other thing I'm excited about when you mention AI is that I think going forward, there's going to be a need for less of the structured thinking that AI can take care of, writing your basic papers or quiz or handling text or pulling up raw data. And there's going to be a bigger desire for creative thinking. Thinking that isn't linear, isn't structured, can't be written into a program, right? You've got experiences throughout your entire life that are seared into your mind, and got these ways of thinking about them that can't be replicated. It's no matter how many times you were to recreate the same AI or the same computer. So I think there's going to be a real call for that cool, creative, outside the box thinking in our future as AI becomes a bigger part of our regular day-to-day. So that'll help as well. But in general, I just think it's the more people talk about it, the more visual that's out there, the more people can see functioning in society and the value that we have, and how we're just human beings. It's just, a little bit different of a way of processing. So it'll get there.
Okay.
It's just painfully slow. It's painfully slow.
I want to ask you both a question, leading on from what Jason just said. Is we mentioned society needs to get to the understanding section, but so what would you I'm going to base this next question off the 5 stages. What stage do you think society is in right now? Evidently we haven't got to the acceptance stage, because that clearly is a long way off. But what stage is society, and are we still in denial, or have we moved to next stage, which is anger and bargaining and
I think for me,
depression?
it depends on what generation you're talking about. So to me, it's almost a generational growth, right? You have older generations that denial as a group. I'm not calling out as I'm not judging individuals within the group as everyone's like that. But as a group, I see the people in my life who are in that older generation are slower to accept it. And so they are less likely to really see that as a normalcy. But when I talk to like my kids or the youngest generation, it's almost like, why would you even call it out different? Of course it's normal. We get it. We embrace those. I've got two best friends that are like that, or so I think as the generations grow and as they learn and as they become more accepting, I think that next generation that's coming up to really enter the workforce and start to take over the creativity and the progress, I think that's the one that's really pushing the acceptance as time passes. Mac, what do you think?
Yeah, I have to agree with that because very much a generational thing, because it's like memory at the end of the day, and muscle memory. And you look at older generations that have been through different experiences, different time paths. Their muscle memory and their neurological pathways have been forged over 20, 50, 60, 70 years. And then to expect that to all of a sudden be reprogrammed overnight is, and this is the younger generation's frustration because of that impatience to kind of go, if I look at the old generation and you kind of think, well, why don't you know how to do that? And it's like, well, you don't have all this other baggage that you had to get through to be able to learn what you're now learning. Because if you could imagine a glass half full, somebody in their 60s, 70s, that glass is full of life experience. Now they've got to take some stuff out of there to be able to put some new stuff in. Whereas when you're younger, the glass is half full. You got space to still bring stuff in. And I love what you were saying earlier about the fact that you also don't like the word disability, because as we go through these generational changes, the importance is that we start changing that mindset and that mantra of somebody who has autism is disabled to they are differently abled. So it's reprogramming how we see individuals, because the programming is different. It's just a different ability. It's not a disability. And and
I would take it even further, the disability piece. I wouldn't even say differently abled, because the way, good point.
That's ableism.
Right. Well, and Stacey's got a good point when she says what we find normal is mostly what we grew up with. That's the case around the world and throughout history. So if I were to pick an infant from any time frame and put it into the scenario where you're growing up in London, you're growing up in New York, you're growing up in San Diego, now they're going to have a certain normal. If you did the same thing and they grew up in Bali, or if they grew up in Tokyo, or if they grew up in Belarus, they're going to have different normal. So that's a continuum that you can never say ability. Are we functional? Can we live, survive? Yes. So we are able, just like anyone else. It's a matter of we or do we not fit into the current cultural structure. And that doesn't have anything to do with disability or ability, right? If we're just not accepted into what everyone sort of wanted it to be, and now we're poking out at teams trying to push it out of the way. That's why I don't like normal. There's no such thing as normal. It's normal as contextual.
But like Stacey said over there, is the question there is, well, who's normal?
Right. Yeah.
So,
I mean, what's normal for my nearly 97-year-old grandpa, I would find crazy.
Yeah.
In his generation, he was allowed. They were using all sorts of words which you're now not allowed to use, and yet he still uses them because that's the generation.
but its information sources were also very different than ours, right? It was the people next door, it was community center, or the people we went to work with were the only information he got, versus, you know, we tend to be inundated with it because it's accessible everywhere and anywhere.
Yeah.
Updated every minute.
Yeah. Fewer people will call you out if you're only witness to those that are physically around you, right? So the people that are in your little community are likely to think like you are, and so your echo chamber is a lot smaller. I think these days we have such a wide spectrum of ability to connect that it's easier for us to start to see, oh, maybe I should change that. Oh, maybe I shouldn't say that. I didn't recognize that was. Oh, there are other people out there with feelings that, you know, I don't want to harm. So hopefully that's what we think.
Absolutely. So, Jason, another question for you. You know, where would you like to see the world in 3 to 5 years' time from now when it comes to how we are working with or supporting neurodiverse individuals, whether it be in the workplace or just generally out in the world?
And don't worry, we're not going to use the word why.
Please do. I probably have an answer backed up. You know, I think that there's a lot to be done that would help just some basic changes in structure. And I advocate for this in a lot of the businesses I work with and some of the people I talk to. Jason Ford and the HR for You, we do a lot of this, like trying to find ways to just tweak the system, right? Tweak the way we hire, tweak the way we train, tweak the way we develop and grow people. But I really think that if I was to call out in 5 years what I think would be most helpful to people of our brain type, I would love to see a real change in the way all people were treated. And I don't mean that like, because I think there's a distinction between saying, here's some carve outs you can make for different types of people to be successful, rather than why not make the field bigger so that, because we know we're missing people. Everyone missed us. Everyone missed left-handed. We're always learning, and we can't think that we're at the pinnacle of our knowledge right now. So there's always going to be groups in the future. So why not adapt a more open and inclusive society that embraces those and leverages those strengths of people doing things in different ways, because there are still plenty of other people out there who aren't diagnosed or have no idea or never will be, and they still struggle. And a number of things, and mental health is a broad umbrella that impacts a lot of people. I have a lot of family with other issues that, you know, it's a struggle for them. So I'd like to see just a general change in the way that businesses treat employees, the way that we look at innovation, the way that we open up the marketplace for people to be innovative and creative, and the way that we embrace that diversity and inclusion, because that diversity of thought comes from a million different slices. We are a few of those slices, but there are so many more. So why not create a bigger approach, this greater approach that's deeper, and then everyone gets to benefit from that, instead of just trying to focus on what we can carve out for, you know, for our stuff to be a little bit easier. Because honestly, a lot of what with is, why can't we help others? It's not just how I'm being treated. I see other people that are struggling too, you know, that sense of justice. So I don't know, 5 years, I'd like to see the workplace and organizations in general really trying to make a change on a broader scale for all people that, you know, have to go to work and make a living.
I'm glad you said that, because Joel and I have had this conversation on many occasions when it comes to the broader thinking, because ultimately, you know, if we're talking about neurodiversity, we're talking about a segment of the population. If we're talking about a certain race, we are talking about a segment of the population. When we're talking about certain religion or whatever it is,
we're talking about
certain
a
culture, a
percentage of the
certain
population,
country, a certain accent in a certain part of the country, there's always going to be this, you know, everybody fighting for the single cause, but that doesn't help us with the greater good. And that means individually, we are always going to be fighting for small individual, you know, causes. But if we can just tweak that to allow us to be slightly more open to learning from everybody, will learn that acceptance and empathy and all those kind of things would massively change how we evolve through life, and make the world so much of a better place. I just saw Felipe has just mentioned the organizations need to do more to make the workplace more inclusive to all, including neurodiverse employees. Absolutely.
But yeah.
And
Yeah, and
everyone,
you know, I
really.
would add something to this, that
Oh.
I think it's really easy. It's easy for us to point out what needs to be better. But going back to the why question, and this is what I ask in this situation, why is it this way? Why is it that people aren't naturally pushing more or falling more towards inclusion and diversity? What's causing that to not be the case? And my experience tells me that it's because it takes courage to question your own structure. And it's scary. And suddenly you don't maybe feel as safe. And we feel our safest with ourselves and with, you know, those like us and those who can communicate like us, or our brains work like us. So it really takes overcoming some of that fear to step forward and say, you know what, I'm going to challenge some of my beliefs, the things that I hold sacred. Maybe challenging that is the way to go, and maybe listening, because if I put myself and empathize with that person who's resistant to it, and I spend a lot of time talking to people who are resistant to diversity or to inclusion to understand where they're really coming from, it's almost always fear-based. And you almost always have this reticence that something is going to hold them back, or they're going to lose something as a result, like lose their culture, lose their job, lose their ability to promote. I mean, there are all these fears, and so understanding where that comes from and giving them, and helping them with that courage, that's the way to make the change. I mean, it's easy to point out people doing things wrong and saying that that's just not good, but how do we get into that person's space and understand that they're having, and then how do we undo some of that, right? And show them safety.
It's a fascinating concept, because if we look at how most wars have started around the world, it's been going into another place saying, well, you're not like me, we're coming in to change what you're doing so you can be more like me. And it's like, and it's just like, when you think about that simplicity, it's like, what?
Yeah.
Like, well, should we come into your place and do the same? Like, it's mind blowing. It's actually quite sad when you think of how pathetic the whole thing is, and the lack of acceptance. I mean, just imagine your whole life, all you ate were potatoes, and you never got to experience any other vegetables, because that's just what you had as a resource. And therefore you tell everybody else you can't eat anything else but potatoes. It's just like, logically, that doesn't compute.
Well, imagine a marketplace that only sells potatoes, and you're trying to come in and sell cabbage for the first time. That's going to see completely. They're going to go to war against you. You're rocking the status quo, and it's a very similar type of experience. Of, if that's all I've got, all I've ever experienced, anything else is going to feel alien and scary, and I'm going to justify pushing it away because I'm going to protect my potato.
Exactly.
I know we've probably opened a can of worms there, but I think that's probably a good place to kind of leave people wanting more for continued conversation.
Mac, you saying you bringing up about various wars about people going into other people's countries, wanting them to be more like them, reminds me of Monty Python's sketch Nights of Knee.
We are the nuts. And it's silly as a third party. You could look at it as a third party look, and it seems crazy. But when you're in it, when it's your culture, your experience, it feels real. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because recently I was in a discussion with somebody who they're working on trying to save a specific group of people in Africa that have been around for thousands of years, and because they haven't integrated into other countries, cultures and the Western way of doing things, and it's they've been ostracized and they've actually been removed from their own land and put into a like a conservation area because they're seen as antiquated. So it's like, well, hold on. If I ride a bicycle and I see you walking along the road, do I now stop you from walking along the road because I've got a bicycle and you're not doing it the way I'm doing it? And then somebody else likes, a skateboard. Now all of a sudden, it's like, it's just mind blowing that we don't allow people just to carry on with their traditions and their ways of doing things. And that keeps that history and that beauty and the vibrance alive. It's just, it's amazing how fearful we are of different. It's an interesting world we live in.
The world.
And if I could leave anyone with a final question, that would be it. Is what do I feel afraid of that might be leading me to act that way in some way?
Yeah.
Right? What am I feeling that fear of that might be impacting somebody else?
That's a great question.
A fantastic question.
Stacey, thank you so much for all your comments.
Thank you, Stacey.
She wants more worms.
Before we wrap up, Mike, should we announce what we're doing in September?
Over to you.
What, you're all coming over to me now, are you? No. In the beginning of September, we are hosting our very first networking platform event, which will be. There will be tickets sold, so feel free to get involved. It will be introverts, it will be extroverts, it will be just people mingling and learning from the wonderful Mac, who's got X marks the spot directly on his head right on my screen.
Just over there.
And yes, that is that's going to be happening on the 4th of September. And that's it from me. Anything from you, Mac?
I think, firstly, Jason, thank you so much for having a very candid, open conversation, which for me was enriching, and it was lovely to hear a different perspective, but at the same time see that we're all pretty much on the same wavelength of that vision of, hey, just being able to learn from people around us and broaden our minds. And I love the questions around the why, and that final question of the why am I afraid? What's making me afraid? Yeah. If you can take just that away, that is incredibly powerful. So for all of those watching, if you're watching this on the replay, make sure that you're following Jason on. Where's the best place to follow you, Jason? I know LinkedIn is one of them, but where else?
Well, aside from brain stuff, I also do art and photography on Instagram. So you can find me at J Grooms Photo on Instagram. Got a Etsy shop and website and everything as well. So
awesome stuff. Well, thank you so much, and make sure that you follow Rockstar X as well.
Yeah,
everybody. But
thank you, everybody.
Reach out to Jason.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for having me.
And
thanks, Joel, for putting this on.
We will see you all in the next live stream. I don't know who will yet, but we'll be working on that behind the scenes. Have a wonderful week, weekend. Mac, are we on Monday now? And
we're another day into the year.
And we will see you next time. Thank you, people.